story I heard was Klein told Suge he was going to cut him up in little pieces and put him in dumpsters all around the city.
Who was the security? Was it Animal or was it? It was one real big old black man.
I said, Mob James is not lying. He did run up in Ruthless with Suge, taking over the record label, doing whatever they wanted to do, but it wasn't us. That was the crew that they fired. Those were scared of Suge. Me and my crew wasn't scared of nobody. We want to fight. Come on and bring it. Like that.
Back when Ruthless Records was running the game in the late 80s and early 90s, Eazy-E was always surrounded by tough enforcers, and that included the Tovio brothers, Jacob and John, and this big dude known as Big Animal.
Who was the security? Was it Animal or was it? It was one real big old black man.
Now these guys did not mess around when it came to protecting Eazy, so when Suge Knight and his crew tried to run up on Eazy, things got ugly fast. Let's get into it. So Mob James, who used to be one of Suge Knight's bodyguards back in the Wild Death Row days, recently shared a story about the time Suge and his crew pulled up to Ruthless Records to try and press Jerry Heller. According to Mob James, when they got to the office, none of Ruthless's security guards were allowed in the room when Suge went to confront Jerry.
My only job was to go in there, what Suge asked us to do, we did it. We didn't let the security or nobody else in that office. Was it Animal or was it twins? It was one real big old black man. I don't know who he is, but he couldn't go in that office.
He made it sound like the security team at the time couldn't do a thing about it, like Suge and his boys were just too much for them. But then Big Animal came out and called cap on that. He did admit that Suge and his guys did confront Jerry, but as for running through security like that, Big Animal said that part wasn't exactly true, at least not the way Mob James was painting it. According to Animal, he and the Samoan twins weren't even on security duty at Ruthless yet when that happened. It was the guards before their time that Mob James was talking about.
I said, Mob James is not lying. He did run up in Ruthless with Suge, taking over the record label, doing whatever they wanted to do, but it wasn't us. That was the crew that they fired. Those scared of Suge. Me and my crew wasn't scared of nobody. We want to fight. Come on and bring it, like that.
Big Animal made it clear. If he and the twins had been there that day, there's no way Suge and his goons would have made it past the front desk, let alone to Jerry Heller's office. And honestly, most fans believe Big Animal, because if you've ever seen a photo of those dudes, you'd understand why. The Samoan twins were massive, towering, broad, and built like tanks. They were the kind of guys who didn't need to say much. Their presence alone made people think twice. You'd always see them flanking Eazy-E in pictures like two walking fortresses. Then you had Big Animal himself, this huge black man, tall, thick, and all business. His main job was making sure Eazy was good, whether it was at shows, in the studio, or in meetings. Wherever Eazy went, Animal was right there, ready for whatever. He was loyal and not the type you wanted to test. And here's the thing. The reason Ruthless brought guys like Big Animal and the twins on board in the first place was because of Suge's little stunt. That moment with Jerry Heller made it clear that Ruthless needed to beef up security for real, and Eazy wasn't about to let something like that happen again. So they went out and brought in serious heat. Enter the boss of bosses, Mike Klein. Now this dude wasn't your average hired muscle. Mike Klein was ex-Israeli Special Forces. That's next level stuff. He was trained to end situations quickly and effectively. According to Jerry Heller's cousin, Gary Ballin, the first time he saw Klein was in a photo where Klein was holding up two severed heads.
The first time I ever saw Mike Klein, it was a picture of him holding up two severed heads. He was in his uniform, so, he was one of those crazy Israeli, army guys.
That should tell you the kind of vibe he brought. Ruthless brought Klein in specifically to deal with the Suge Knight problem. And Klein didn't come alone. He rolled with a crew of guys who were just as intense. Once Klein's team took over security, everything changed. According to Ballin, Eazy loved Klein. He liked that Rambo, no-nonsense energy Klein brought to the table. He was a beast when it came to hand-to-hand combat, and he was a marksman with a gun. Even Big Animal admitted that at first he didn't know what to make of Klein, but that changed fast.
So then we met Mike Klein. He was like, head of the security.
for Rufus and stuff, man. You know, I was checking him out and stuff like, man, this guy don't look like he's too much nothing, man. Boy, was I wrong.
Klein never missed a shot at the range and had this unsettling calm about him, like he smiled at chaos.
This fight Klein can box, he can fight, he can shoot. You know how like shoot a target, you know, they go like bang, 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 you know, and they're like hit the bullseye.
And Klein actually confronted Suge Knight face to face. There are two versions of the story. One says Klein looked Suge dead in the eye and told him that if he ever came back to Ruthless uninvited, he'd leave in a casket. The other version was Klein supposedly said he'd chop Suge into pieces and dump him in dumpsters all across LA.
The story I heard was Klein told Suge he was going to cut him up in little pieces and put him in dumpsters all around the city.
Either way, the message was loud and clear. Suge Knight wasn't welcome anymore. Not at Ruthless, not around Eazy, not anywhere near that building. Once Klein and his crew were in place, Suge's intimidation tactics didn't hit the same. So how did things get so tense between Ruthless Records and Suge Knight that Eazy-E had to bring in full-blown security squads like Big Animal, the Samoan Twins, and even a former Israeli Special Forces guy? How it started when Eazy-E brought in Jerry Heller to help co-manage Ruthless Records. It seemed like a smart business move at first, but that decision ended up stirring up a lot of tension instead. Instead of bringing peace and structure, Heller's presence actually made things worse, and the artists under the label weren't feeling him at all.
You can ask any artist on Ruthless Records if they're happy. I bet you they say no.
Ice Cube eventually bounced. Not long after that, Dr. Dre wanted out too. And who was waiting right there in the shadows, ready to make a move? Suge Knight. The Doc, this guy who handled a lot of the writing for NWA and even had his own solo career going. Things were looking great for him until just 5 months after dropping his debut album, disaster struck. He got into a horrific accident that nearly cost him his life. He survived, but his voice was gone, which meant his rap career was pretty much over. After his accident, things between him and the group started to shift. His contract became a huge issue, and he found himself stuck in a bad deal with no way out. That's where Suge Knight stepped in. Back then, Suge was working as his bodyguard, and he had been by his side through all the rough times. But then, Suge started digging into his contract, and that's when they realized the Doc was being ripped off.
Doc, the DLC was a friend of mine.
Right.
And the guy had, he had a tragic, it was an accident. So I said, well, look, one thing you can count on that, you write songs.
Right.
You done wrote X amount of songs for Eazy, you done wrote X amount of songs for NWA. That's worth a lot of money to you.
Right.
Word of this got back to Dre, and when he heard Suge was helping the Doc fight for his rights, he saw his chance. Dre asked Suge to take a look at his own situation, but it was a different ballgame. Suge claimed Dre never had a contract, so instead of acting right away, they decided to play it smart and come up with a solid plan. Before making any big moves, Dre went straight to Eazy for a face-to-face conversation. He wanted answers. After all, they built NWA together, so it only felt right to handle it man-to-man. But Eazy wasn't having it. Things escalated until Dre gave him an ultimatum. He had to choose between him and Heller, and just like that, Eazy chose Heller. That told Dre everything he needed to know.
I said, listen, man, all of this going back and forth, man, either Jerry goes or I go. And he looked me in my face and said, I can't get rid of Jerry.
Dre didn't waste any more time. He demanded to have his contract terminated. He was ready to walk away from Ruthless Records for good. But just when it seemed like things could end cleanly, Eazy-E wasn't about to let him go so easily. He insisted that Dre had to fulfill his contract before he could leave. And just like that, the whole situation turned into a full-blown war. Since Suge couldn't get to Eazy, he went after the people around Eazy. Suge and his crew rolled up on Jerry Heller, demanding Dre's contract. And according to Mob James, who was part of Suge's circle back then, Jerry was literally frozen with fear, stuck in his seat like he saw a ghost. That wasn't the end of it either.
So, but Jerry's in the room with this big Suge Knight guy.
Just them two. Suge got a check out of him, and he got Dre. We walked out of there, and he was sitting at his desk where Suge left him. Walked out of there. Suge, I don't think Suge had to put his hands on him or nothing. He was that scared.
In fact, after the contract incident, Jerry's house got broken into. A few things were stolen, but the real kicker was that someone spray painted a threatening message on his mirror. There was no solid proof it was Suge, but Jerry had no doubt in his mind who was behind it.
Your house was vandalized. Your life was threatened.
Right.
What were some of the incidents that, I mean, didn't you come home one time and found out that your house was broken into?
Yeah, there was a lot of stuff missing, and on the wall was spray painted, on the mirror in one of the bedrooms was spray painted, "Payback's a motherfucker," or "Payback, Jerry." You know, one of those things. You know, I always felt that that Suge had something to do with it.
From that point on, Jerry was spooked. Just hearing Suge's name was enough to make him lose it. Things at Ruthless were getting shaky, and the pressure from Suge wasn't letting up. That's when Eazy and Jerry decided to bring in some serious backup. Fast forward, and at the end of it all, even Eazy-E, the one who had defended Jerry for so long, finally saw the truth. Jerry really was robbing him blind. Ice Cube had been right all along.
Jerry Heller just wasn't fair with his money and misappropriated a bunch of Eazy-E's funds, and he started feeling like Ice Cube was right.
But by the time Eazy realized it, the damage was done. He fired Jerry, but for many that felt like nothing more than a slap on the wrist. Some even argue that Jerry was lucky. Eazy could have done far worse to him than just letting him go. On top of stealing from Eazy, Jerry had indirectly caused one of the biggest feuds in hip-hop history between Eazy and Suge. And just to top it all off, after everything he did, Jerry had the nerve to turn around and sue Eazy. So yeah, considering all that, the fact that Eazy just cut ties instead of retaliating shows he showed a lot more restraint than most would have expected. Eazy could have gone there if he wanted to. His street ties were no joke. Beyond the Israeli security muscle, Eazy had another dangerous connection most people don't talk about: the Mexican Mafia. Eazy always had a deep respect for Chicano culture and was genuinely into the Latin side of hip-hop. That love for the scene led him to sign Brownside, a Chicano rap group led by the late Toker, a real street legend.
Eric was always into the Chicano rap, and well, not even Chicano rap, he was just into the Latinos, because he knew that they were his fans. He had already signed the Brownside, and then he ended up signing Kid Frost, and we ended up working on the Brownside record, you know what I mean? And you know, that was his thing. He thought everything was about the Latinos, you know what I mean?
According to Toker, the connection with Eazy happened pretty naturally. Eazy heard one of Brownside's tracks through a mutual acquaintance, and the rest was history. He reached out, they met up, and from there, it was all love.
How you hook up with Eazy-E? Cause I mean, you on Ruthless Records now.
Yeah, we plugged up with the homie 3 years ago. He heard our music through some other people. He found out we real motherfuckers from the streets, you know. So he wanted to f with us.
But the Brownside wasn't just a rap group trying to make it big. These guys were the real deal. They were gang affiliated and had serious weight in the streets. People who knew them back then would often say that just standing in the same room with these dudes was enough to make someone's knees buckle. Their reputation was no joke.
Toker, yeah, they were on Ruthless, man, yeah. Another dude that ain't no joke. Toker was one of the few cats that I just was nervous.
He's raw as hell, basically.
He just one of them dudes. He's cool. He was super cool.
Yeah.
He's super cool. But you can tell it's a gun somewhere in the vicinity. It's strapped somewhere around here.
Real motherfucker. These guys ain't rappers. These guys are real gangsters. Because I worked with other gangster rappers. These guys are real.
That's part of what drew Eazy to them. He loved how the Latino gangs treated each other like family, loyal to the core, no questions asked. To them, your homies were your blood, and they'd go to war for you in a heartbeat. Eazy admired that ride-or-die mentality and kept them close. He knew that if things ever turned dangerous, and they often did in Eazy's world, these were the guys who would step up without hesitation. One major example of this loyalty came when there were rumors that a white supremacist group, the KKK, had allegedly put a hit out on Eazy. Now, whether or not that story was blown out of proportion, Eazy himself reportedly said that if anything had happened to him, it would have set off a full-scale riot in Compton. Why? Because the Mexican gangs would have gone to war for him. That's how deep their loyalty ran.
He said, remember when the KKK had that hit on me? And he said, I bet if something had happened to me, the Mexicans would have been down, you know? And he said, if something happened to me, he goes, I think there would have been a riot.
but long before he signed legendary Chicano rap groups or worked with Latino artists, Eazy had tight relationships with the Mexican homies in his circle. One of his closest friends early on was a Mexican-American named Damon Trujillo, better known as Crazy D. If you look closely at the cover of NWA and the Posse, NWA's very first album, you'll notice something that threw fans off for years. Here's the thing. NWA stood for N with attitude, so when people saw the album cover, they couldn't help but wonder who the one person that obviously didn't fit the name was. At first, rumors started floating around that someone might have photoshopped themselves into the iconic picture. But if you go back and look up the real album cover, they're all the same. That man standing proudly in the photo is Crazy D. Crazy D wasn't just there for the picture though. At that time, he was actually more involved with NWA than some of its core members, like MC Ren, who only ended up in the photo because he happened to be with his friends that day. Crazy D wasn't just part of the crew, he was contributing to their music too. In fact, he was credited on NWA's first single ever, Panic Zone, where he helped shape the sound they were building. In a way, Crazy D proves that Eazy's bond with the Mexican community was there from the very beginning. But Eazy's relationship with the Latino community didn't stop there. Years later, he would go on to cement that connection in a big way when he signed Brownside. Brownside, in particular, was something special. Under Eazy's guidance, they became pioneers of Chicano rap, laying down the blueprint for how the genre would sound and feel. But Brownside wasn't just another rap group trying to capitalize on a trend. These guys were real gangsters, straight out of the streets with stories to tell. Everything they rapped about was authentic. There were no exaggerations, no clout-chasing antics, just raw, real-life experiences that reflected who they were.
Came up and started blasting 'cause I knew they couldn't fake it. And I'm straight gang related.
Brownside was also in the mix during the whole beef between Suge and Eazy, and they played a huge role in keeping Eazy safe during this time. According to Toker, he and the Brownside crew showed up at Ruthless Records right when things started getting heated between Eazy and Suge. Toker described it as almost fate, like destiny brought them there at just the right time. Toker said that during one of their conversations, they told Eazy straight up, "If there's anyone you want gone, just say the word." Eazy, being the kind of guy he was, tried to brush it off. He told them, "It's not like that, man," trying to downplay the situation, but Toker wasn't having it. He looked Eazy in the eye and said, "Nah, it's exactly like that."
Told E, we rolling with you, fool. We got your back. What's cracking with this death row ruthless? Who you want gone? 'Cause we ain't around.
Toker made it clear to Eazy that if he just mentioned a name, they'd handle it. And he wasn't bluffing. Toker said they had youngins, kids who were 15 or 16 years old, that were more than ready to step up and do the job. In Toker's words, at most they'll let them out when they're 22, so you don't gotta worry about a thing. That's how serious they were.
I'm gonna send my little young juvenile torpedoes so they can go ahead and do YA life. They won't let my boys out when they're 22 years old. Don't worry about it.
After that conversation, things between Eazy and the Mexican community became even tighter. Eazy knew he had an army behind him. These guys were ready for whatever. They were hoping to run into anyone from Death Row Records so they could make a statement and prove to Eazy that they had his back till the very end. And one day, they got their chance. According to Toker, Eazy was chilling at a cheesecake factory when about 7 or 8 guys claiming to be affiliated with Death Row appeared. These guys surrounded Eazy, trying to intimidate him. These dudes were trying to flex their strength, maybe thinking they'd caught him alone and vulnerable.
And there was like 7, 8 motherfuckers that claimed death row waiting for their cars to pull up because they were leaving the Cheesecake Factory. Right when my boy E walked past them, they all surrounded him. "What's up?" And they were saying the N-word.
But they didn't realize what they had walked into. Out of nowhere, the tables turned. Suddenly, the Death Row guys found themselves surrounded. And not just by a few people, Toker described it as feeling like they were at a Mexican soccer field. The entire place was filled with Mexican gang members who showed up to protect Eazy. These weren't random guys either. They were real gangsters, people who didn't play around.
And all of a sudden, them 7, 8 motherfuckers looked around like, we're surrounded. They thought they were at a Mexican soccer field surrounded by Mexican soccer players, but it was us. I said, "What's up, man? You motherfuckers got beef with my brother Eazy?" They were like, "Oh, damn. You motherfuckers got beef with my little brother Eazy? You got beef with me, motherfuckers." And then my little homie started coming out with the heat. They were like, "No, man."
The Death Row affiliates were completely shook. The intimidation game flipped on them real quick and they knew they were outnumbered. Without wasting any time, they scrambled out of there, jumping into their cars and speeding off like their lives depended on it. And just to send a message, Toker and the crew didn't let them leave quietly. Toker told them straight up, "In case y'all want to come back, you're more than welcome. We'll be right here waiting." This was a statement, one that made it loud and clear that Eazy-E wasn't alone, and if anyone thought they could intimidate him, they'd have to deal with the Mexican gangs of Compton.